Welcome to Tomorrow Unveiled, where we dissect the strategic shifts shaping our world. You know, we are watching something really significant happening in global energy right now. It feels like the biggest pivot, maybe in decades.
Definitely. It's not just the usual drivers anymore.
Exactly. It's not simply about, climate goals, though that's still there. It's being pushed, really pushed, by two huge immediate forces. One is the absolutely exponential power demand coming from artificial intelligence. It's almost insatiable.
Off the charts.
And the other is this absolute non-negotiable need for national security. So we're moving past just looking for clean energy. Now it feels like we're hunting for ultimate energy.
Ultimate energy, I like that.
Yeah, sources that are clean, sure, but also incredibly dense and just ceaselessly reliable, like 24/7 no matter what happens.
And that pivot, that's exactly what we're focusing on this week for Tomorrow Unveiled. It's a concept we've been calling green code hot core.
Green code, hot core. Okay, break that down.
Well, the green code part is still the goal, right? Net zero emissions. That hasn't changed. But the hot core, well, that's the engine that the 21st century really needs. It's about high power density and that 2047 reliability.
The kind needed by, well, a world that's increasingly digitized and just cannot handle power cuts or intermittency.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And the sources our dedicated research team pulled together this week, they really confirm this. There's this undeniable and frankly accelerated pivot towards these high-density sources.
Like advanced nuclear fission, fusion projects getting serious.
Exactly. And next-generation energy storage, too. Really revolutionary stuff.
And the key thing, based on the research team's findings, is that this isn't just theory anymore, is it? It's not white papers.
Not at all. It's translating directly into policy, into massive billion-dollar investments and, actual steel going into the ground all over the world.
So our mission today on Tomorrow Unveiled is to really unpack this, right? Do a proper deep dive into the facts.
Yeah, look at the cross-corroborated evidence that shows this shift is happening way faster than, well, frankly, almost anyone predicted. We need to examine the military directives, these huge corporate deals.
It's scientific breakthroughs.
All of it.
Yeah.
But all centered on energy tech that uses minimal land, that's crucial and provides firm, continuous power. This really feels like the moment high-density energy stops being some far-off R&D dream.
And starts becoming a real functioning industrial ecosystem.
That's it, exactly.
Okay, so let's start with the foundation, the stuff that's closest to reality right now. That's advanced nuclear fission, okay? Specifically small modular reactors, SMRs, and even smaller microreactors. And if you trace back the absolute core driver, the thing really pushing this forward, the analysis seems crystal clear. It's where AI's power hunger meets national security needs.
It is. And what's really fascinating is how AI just fundamentally changes the whole equation for power generation needs. It's not just that AI data centers use a lot of power.
They use a ton of power.
A ton, yeah. But it's continuous load. Massive continuous load. And it's growing at a rate we've honestly never seen before.
So they need that super high-density baseload power. The research mentions something like a 92.5% capacity factor.
Or even higher, yeah. That means the power needs to be on nearly all the time, rock solid, no fluctuations.
Yeah.
And intermittent sources, even if you pair them with today's typical batteries, well, they struggle.
They just can't provide that kind of unwavering supply reliably enough.
Right. And the projections from the research team are just staggering. They suggest that AI demands alone could gobble up as much electricity as, say, Germany or Japan by 2030.
Wow. An entire industrialized nation's worth of power just for AI by 2030.
It puts enormous immediate pressure on grids, on utilities. You can see why they're scrambled.
And that pressure leads us to microreactors, right? They're really small ones, like 1 to 50 megawatts.
Exactly. Because they're being prioritized for secure off-grid uses. Think about the military.
Ah, okay. So it's about getting off vulnerable supply lines.
Precisely. It gets them away from relying on diesel logistics. Those fuel convoys that are complex to manage and, frankly, easy targets in unstable regions. Microreactors offer power security right on site.
Which brings us to a specific program the research highlighted, the U.S. military's Janus Program.
Yes, Janeis. And this isn't just another study. It's a deployment initiative. The U.S. Army is planning to put commercial microreactors onto military bases.
Okay, deployment. What kind of timeline are we talking about? Because nuclear projects usually take forever.
Well, this is where it gets interesting. The timeline they've set is incredibly aggressive. The goal is to have at least one operational microreactor on a domestic base by September 2028.
2028, seriously, that's lightning fast for anything nuclear.
It really is. And what makes Janus so important, so pivotal, isn't just about securing a few Army bases. It's about the entire SMR industry.
How so? What's the broader impact?
It essentially acts as the industry's critical anchor customer. It helps solve what's called the first-of-a-kind cost problem, the FOAK problem.
FOAK cost, right. The first one is always super expensive to build.
Exactly. Historically, the huge upfront capital needed, plus the regulatory risk for that very first commercial plant. It makes financing almost impossible. You're talking potentially billions in extra cost, just because it's the first one, no economies of scale yet, terrible loan terms.
Because the military steps in.
The military steps in and guarantees they'll buy the first ones. They provide that guaranteed, bankable customer for the initial batch of reactors. It solves that huge financial hurdle.
Okay, so the government takes on that initial risk that private money usually avoids.
Precisely. They de-risk the whole technology pipeline for everyone else. And the way they're doing it, the contracting model, it's milestone-based.
Milestone-based. That sounds familiar.
It should. It's basically the same model NASA used with its COTS program. You know, the one that essentially kickstarted the commercial space industry.
Ah, right. Giving companies like SpaceX guaranteed contracts if they hit performance targets.
It's exactly. Not based on cost overruns, but on hitting milestones. So, by sharing that early financial and regulatory burden, the government is essentially building the on-ramp for widespread commercialization.
And looks like the private sector is ready and waiting to use that on-ramp. We saw some huge commercial commitments reported this week, didn't we? Especially from big tech.
Oh, absolutely. They're grappling with how to power their future growth, especially with AI. The commitment from Amazon really stands out.
The one in Washington State, the Cascade facility.
That's the one. The research team highlighted that Amazon has reportedly tripled its commitment there. They're planning for 12 X-energy S100 reactors.
12 reactors? How much power is that?
Totals a massive 960 megawatts capacity. And they're targeting operations for the early 2030s.
But the interesting part, according to the analysis, is how they're doing it. It's not just a standard power purchase agreement, or PPA.
No, and this is key. It's structured more like a direct investment. This shows a really deep, almost proprietary commitment to locking down reliable, high-density nuclear baseload power.
So they're not just buying the electricity, they're investing in the source itself.
Pretty much. They recognize that their whole business, cloud, data, AI, it absolutely depends on firm, continuous power. They just cannot afford downtime. So this investment is like an insurance policy for their future growth.
Makes sense. Meanwhile, while the West is using these kinds of deals to build the industry, the global SMR race is definitely on. China hit a big milestone, right?
They did. Their Linglong 1 SMR just completed its cold functional test. That's a major step.
And why is Linglong 1 significant on the world stage?
Yeah. It's reportedly the first commercial land-based SMR designed to actually pass the rigorous safety review from the International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA.
Okay, so it's got that international stamp of approval.
Yeah. And it's designed to generate about 1 billion kilowatt hours a year. It sets a strong global benchmark for deployment speed and getting through the regulatory hoops. It shows the SMR concept isn't just a Western thing. It's potentially a proven exportable technology.
And back here in the U.S., is the policy catching up with this pace, the regulatory side?
It seems to be trying. The research confirms the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the NRC, is definitely working to speed up licensing. They're now targeting final decisions within about 18 months for new reactor applications.
18 months. Compared to what it used to be, that's a huge difference.
It's transformative. Licensing used to be this multi-year ordeal, sometimes taking a decade or more, which obviously scared off investors. This speed-up is crucial for projects like TerraPower's Interim reactor.
The Bill Gates-backed one?
That's right. It's already apparently received an expedited review timeline, aiming to finish 8 months ahead of schedule.
Yeah.
So yeah, we are finally seeing some of those policy barriers, which were long seen as the biggest roadblock for nuclear, starting to align with the tech readiness.
Okay, so fission, especially SMRs and microreactors, that seems like the solid foundation being laid right now, heavily pushed by military and tech needs.
Right, the near-term high-density solution.
But then there's the ultimate dream, right? Nuclear fusion. Historically, it's always seemed, 30 years away.
Always 30 years away, yeah. That was the old joke.
But the conversation around fusion, based on this week's research, seems to have fundamentally shifted. It's not just lab experiments anymore.
Not at all. It's becoming a serious industrial investment category.
Yeah.
And that's backed up by real money. The IAEA confirmed that global private investment in fusion has now shot past $10 billion.
$10 billion. Wow. That feels like a real psychological threshold crossed. from pure science to potential industry.
It absolutely is. That amount of capital signals a definite strategic shift.
Mm.
It means we're seeing a proper industrial ecosystem forming companies, buying materials, building supply chains, hiring engineers, not just theoretical physicists.
So it's a global effort.
Very much so.
Mm.
The data shows nearly 40 countries are involved now, with over 160 different fusion devices being worked on globally.
Mm-hmm.
Everyone's racing to crack that net energy gain problem commercially.
And attached to this funding, we're seeing commercial timelines that sound, well, incredibly near term, almost surprisingly so.
Yeah, look at Helium Energy up in Washington State again. They just got the key construction permits for what they are billing as the world's first commercial fusion power plant.
Okay, permits are one thing, but what's their target date?
Their plan, and they seem to be sticking to it, is to actually deliver power to their key customer, Microsoft, by 2028.
Hang on. 2028, that's the same year the Army is targeting for deploying proven fission microreactors with the Janus program. So Helium thinks they can go from construction permit to commercial fusion power delivery in basically 4 years. Is that realistic, or is the private sector just incredibly bullish?
Well, it's a multi-billion-dollar question, isn't it? It highlights this core tension. Is the physics the main hurdle anymore? Or is it the regulatory and development pathway?
Meaning, can private companies maybe move faster than government-led fission projects?
That seems to be the bet Helium is making. They're pushing the boundaries, taking on huge risk for potentially huge rewards. They believe their specific approach, it's a field-reversed configuration, not a traditional tokamak, might be easier to scale and commercialize faster.
Easier than the big donut-shaped tokamaks.
Potentially, yes. They're betting their magnetic compression tech can hit that 2028 target. And obviously Microsoft, with its massive power needs, is willing to fund that high-stakes bet.
And Helium isn't the only fusion company securing commitments for power that doesn't actually exist yet, right?
Not by a long shot.
Yeah.
Take Commonwealth Fusion Systems, CFS. They're building a more traditional, though advanced tokamak called ARC.
The MIT spinout.
That's them. The research highlighted they've secured over $1 billion in power purchase commitments already.
$1 billion in commitments.
From who? From major utilities, big energy players like Eni and other tech giants like Google. They're all signing up, putting money down for ARC's power, which CFS is targeting for the early 2030s.
So utilities, the companies that have to keep the lights on, are signing contracts for fusion power targeted for about 10 years out.
Yes, that's a massive vote of confidence. They're betting this technology will arrive, and maybe more importantly, that it will be a fundamentally better, cleaner, denser source of energy when it does.
That confidence has to be based on some tangible progress, though. It can't all be hype and investment dollars.
Oh, it's definitely rooted in real technical steps forward, particularly in keeping the fusion reaction stable and running for longer periods. We saw a new record reported this week from France's West Tokamak.
Okay, what did they achieve?
They managed to sustain a high-power plasma reaction for over 22 minutes. That's 1,337 seconds.
22 minutes. Why is that duration such a big deal?
Because sustaining the plasma, keeping that super hot reaction going stably, is one of the absolute biggest engineering challenges for fusion. You need it to run continuously for commercial power plants.
Right, you can't just pulse it on and off.
Exactly. So achieving that kind of duration over 22 minutes shows real, tangible progress towards the continuous operation you need to actually generate usable power reliably. It demonstrates viability.
Okay, so we've got the military driving fission forward with Janus, and these huge corporate deals and technical milestones accelerating fusion. The hot core really does seem to be moving from just an idea to, well, an industrial race.
A very well-funded race.
Okay, but even with super dense fission and fusion plants providing base load, the grid of the future isn't just about those big centralized sources, is it?
No, absolutely not. You still need flexibility. You need ways to manage demand locally and provide resilience right down to the end user.
So we also need high-density, smart energy storage to balance things out. The hot core idea needs to apply to storage tech, too.
That's exactly right. And this is where the distributed intelligent power side of the equation comes in.
Right.
And we saw a huge validation of this approach this week with the virtual power plant, or VPP, model.
Ah, VPPs. Aggregating lots of smaller resources. What was the news there?
A company called Base Power raised an absolutely massive $1 billion Series C funding round.
$1 billion for a VPP company. That's huge.
It is. And it's really validating their specific approach, which they call a vertically integrated Gen-Tailor model.
Okay, Gen-Tailor. That sounds like generator plus retailer. Break that down for us. What makes their model different?
Well, it's all about control and capturing the full value stack.
Hmm.
A typical VPP might just provide software to manage other people's batteries. Base power, though, acts as both the generator or operator of distributed generation and storage and the retailer.
How do they do that?
They actually install large company-owned batteries in their customers' homes. We're talking pretty big ones, like 25 to 50 kilowatt hours.
So base power owns the battery in your house.
Yes. They own the asset, they own the software platform that controls it, and they act as the customer's retail electricity provider. Then they aggregate all these batteries they own into one big virtual power plant.
And use that VPP to sell services back to the main grid, like frequency regulation or soaking up excess solar.
Exactly. High-value grid services. And here's the kicker. Because they own the entire chain, the hardware, the software, the customer relationship, the grid connection, they capture 100% of the revenue from selling those valuable grid services.
Unlike a software VPP that might have to share that revenue with the homeowner who owns the battery.
Precisely. Base Power argues this deep integration gives them a compounding cost advantage. It's a massive bet, very capital-intensive upfront because they buy all the batteries, but they believe owning the whole stack will be far more profitable and scalable in the long run.
So it's a decisive move towards high-density distributed power, but with centralized ownership and control.
You could put it that way, yeah. Very interesting model.
But even these really smart VPPs, whether they own the assets or not, they depend on batteries getting better, right? Especially lasting longer.
Absolutely. Which leads us to another key development the research team flagged this week. A potential breakthrough in flow batteries, specifically aimed at that duration challenge.
Flow batteries. These are the ones that store energy in liquids, right?
That's them. And the news was the unveiling of a new zinc-polyiodide, ZenR22-DIR, Redox flow battery. The claim is that it achieves an energy density of 320 watt-hours per liter.
Okay, 320 WHL. That sounds technical. Put that in context for us. Is that good?
It's potentially game-changingly good. The report suggests that's maybe 20 times higher energy density than conventional vanadium flow batteries, which are the most common type today.
20 times denser. Wow. Why does higher density translate into a duration breakthrough for flow batteries?
Okay, so remember, lithium-ion batteries are great for short bursts, maybe 1 to 4 hours. Flow batteries are designed differently. The energy is stored in liquid electrolytes held in external tanks, and the power conversion happens in a separate stack.
Right, so more energy just means bigger tanks.
Exactly. To get longer duration, 5 hour, 10 hours, even days, you just make the electrolyte tanks bigger. Now, if your electrolyte liquid itself is 20 times more energy dense,
You need tanks that are 20 times smaller to store the same amount of energy for the same duration. Or you can get much longer duration in the same footprint.
Precisely. It translates directly into space efficiency, lower installation costs, smaller physical footprint. That's huge for grid-scale projects or fitting storage into constrained spaces, like maybe alongside those AI data centers we talked about.
And this specific zinc-polyiodide chemistry, does it address some of the other issues with lithium-ion besides just duration?
It seems to. The research highlighted that it uses earth-abundant materials. Zinc and iodine aren't like lithium or cobalt with their geopolitical supply chain issues. And crucially, it's reportedly non-flammable.
Okay, non-flammable is a big deal, especially if you're putting these near data centers or critical infrastructure.
Absolutely. So it targets 3 key weaknesses of lithium-ion head-on: the limited duration, the fire risk concern, and those tricky supply chain dependencies. This kind of long-duration, safer, denser storage is exactly what you need to complement the firm baseload power from that hot core.
So you're seeing density improvements everywhere, central power plants and distributed storage. It really feels like density is the watchword across the board.
It really does seem to be the key metric everyone's chasing. #TagIV, policy and geopolitical strategy.
Okay, let's zoom out a bit now. We've talked tech, we've talked investment. How does this all connect to the bigger picture? Government policy, geopolitics?
Well, that's where it gets really strategic. Governments and alliances aren't just pushing high-density energy for climate reasons or even just grid stability. It's increasingly about hard geopolitical leverage and national security.
And the sources our team analyzed seem to show a really interesting split, a kind of strategic divergence in how the US and Europe are tackling this, right?
Yeah, there are definitely different approaches emerging. Let's start with the U.S. approach. It looks very mission-driven, quite top-down. The Janus Program is a perfect example.
Using military needs as the driving force.
Exactly. It's focused, it's targeted, using specific security goals, military readiness, powering critical AI infrastructure to essentially pull advanced nuclear tech into commercial reality faster than the market might do on its own.
And they're using targeted funding to do that.
Very much so. And sometimes, the analysis noted, this comes at the expense of other energy sectors. We saw reports that the Department of Energy canceled billions in grants for certain projects.
Billions. What kinds of projects got cut?
Things like some grid modernization initiatives, certain clean hydrogen hubs, particularly those maybe relying more on lower density or intermittent sources.
Okay, so canceling funding for some clean energy projects to focus more intensely on others. What's the logic there?
It looks like a very deliberate strategic pivot, prioritization. The thinking seems to be, if funds are limited, they need to go to the technologies that solve the most urgent, critical national security needs first. And right now, that's being defined as continuous high-capacity power for defense and essential computing.
So less spreading the money around, more focusing it on firm, dense power like nuclear.
It appears that way. It's a strong signal about where the priorities lie.
Okay, so that's the U.S. top-down, mission-driven, using security needs to pull technology forward. How does the EU approach compare? It seems more bottom-up.
That's a good way to put it. It's more focused on market making. The main vehicle is the European Industrial Alliance on SMRs.
Right, the alliance trying to get SMRs deployed across Europe.
Yes.
Yeah.
They have a 10-point action plan, also targeting deployment in the early 2030s. But their primary challenge, and therefore focus, is different. It's about harmonizing the incredibly fragmented regulatory landscape across all the different EU member states.
Ah, because each country has its own nuclear regulator, its own rules.
Exactly. It's a complex patchwork. So while the U.S. can use its unified military structure as a powerful procurement engine, the EU needs to leverage its unified economic structure. Their goal is to break down those cross-border regulatory barriers to create one large, seamless continental market where SMRs can actually be deployed efficiently.
Two different strategies, but the end goal seems similar. Build up a strong domestic or allied capability in advanced nuclear.
Definitely. And a huge part of that for both is building a trusted, allied supply chain, one that can compete effectively with the state-backed nuclear giants, namely Russia and China, who've really dominated the global nuclear export market for a long time.
And we saw evidence of that alliance building this week?
Yes, the research pointed to several new international agreements, notably partnerships forming between the U.S. and the U.K. and the U.S. and South Korea.
What's the focus of these partnerships? Pooling resources.
Pooling capital, sharing technology, coordinating on manufacturing, yes. But perhaps the most critical focus within these alliances, according to the analysis, isn't just building the reactors themselves, it's shoring up the nuclear fuel cycle, especially for something called AAU.
AAU, high-assay, low-enriched uranium. We've heard that term before. Remind us why it's so important for these new reactors.
Right, so AAU is uranium enriched to between 5% and 20% higher than the roughly 5% used in traditional large reactors. Many of these advanced SMR designs require AKU to function efficiently and achieve their smaller size.
Okay, so it's the necessary fuel. But why is the Western supply chain for it described as nascent or vulnerable? Didn't we used to make this stuff?
Well, that's the problem. It boils down to historical economics and, frankly, geopolitical complacency. For decades, the big market was for standard low-enriched uranium for large reactors. There just wasn't a significant commercial demand for HALEU, so the capacity to produce it in large quantities outside of, well, Russia wasn't really built up or maintained in the West.
So Russia cornered the market, essentially.
They maintained a significant capability, yes, partly for their own advanced reactor programs and research. So now, as the U.S. and its allies are rushing to deploy all these new SMRs that need HALEU, they face a major strategic choke point.
We need the fuel, but the main supplier is a geopolitical rival. Not ideal.
Not ideal at all. The existing capacity in the West is critically low, and much of the processing relied on Russian services. So these new partnerships, especially the ones highlighted with South Korean firms like KHNP, are laser-focused on mobilizing billions in investment to build out a secure, domestic, or allied HALEU supply chain, primarily in the U.S.
So it's really about fuel security underpinning energy security, a geopolitical realignment playing out through uranium enrichment.
That's a big part of the strategic game right now, absolutely.
Okay, this is fascinating stuff. If you're finding this insightful, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to Tomorrow Unveiled, and maybe consider hitting that new hype button to help us reach more viewers. And of course, be sure to turn on notifications so you never miss an update on the future. Hashtag VEC, sustainability, land use, and the critical constraints.
Right. So we've painted a picture of rapid technological progress and strategic alignment around this green code, hot core idea.
Yeah.
But we absolutely have to pivot now to the reality check.
The constraints, the challenges.
Exactly. Because this high-density strategy isn't a magic bullet. It comes with its own very significant set of sustainability issues and political hurdles. And there's one paradox right at the heart of the SMR movement that the research really digs into, the nuclear waste paradox.
Okay, the waste issue. We know the benefits of SMRs get talked about a lot. Zero emissions during operation, tiny land footprint compared to renewables, local jobs.
All true. The consensus on those benefits is pretty strong. However, independent studies, highlighted by our research team, project something quite counterintuitive. They suggest SMRs might actually produce significantly more nuclear waste volume per unit of energy generated compared to traditional large nuclear plants.
More waste volume. How much more?
The range cited in the analysis is startlingly wide, anywhere from 2 to 30 times more waste volume per megawatt hour.
2 to 30 times. That's a huge range. Why would smaller reactors produce more waste? It feels backwards.
It does feel backwards, but it comes down to basic reactor physics, specifically something called neutron leakage, which is related to the core's surface area to volume ratio.
Okay, physics time. Explain neutron leakage.
Think of it like this. A huge conventional reactor core is like a giant bonfire. Most of the heat, or in this case neutrons driving the chain reaction, stays contained deep inside. Relatively fewer neutrons escape out the sides compared to the total number bouncing around inside.
Okay, big core, neutrons stay busy inside.
Right, now picture a much smaller SMR core. Think of a small campfire. Because its surface area is much larger relative to its internal volume, a much higher fraction of the neutrons produced actually leak out of the core before they hit another fuel atom and cause fission.
So smaller core means more neutrons escape.
Proportionally, yes. And those escaping neutrons don't just disappear. They fly out and slam into the surrounding materials, the steel reactor vessel, internal structures, things like that.
And what happens when neutrons hit steel?
They activate it. They literally transmute stable atoms in the steel into radioactive isotopes, some with very long half-lives. This neutron-activated metal becomes long-lived radioactive waste. The study suggests SMRs could produce maybe 9 times more of this activated steel waste per unit of energy.
So the waste isn't just spent fuel, it's also the irradiated reactor components themselves. And SMRs generate more of that irradiated metal.
That's the projection, yes. More spent fuel volume, because the fuel might be used less efficiently due to leakage, and significantly more activated metal volume. So the very thing that makes SMRs appealing, their compact size, paradoxically, seems to worsen the waste volume issue.
And this waste issue, volume aside, feeds directly into what the research identifies as the industry's single biggest political vulnerability, right?
Absolutely. It's the lack of a long-term permanent disposal solution for any high-level nuclear waste, whether from big reactors or small ones. And the SMR waste characteristics might complicate that further.
And we saw a really stark example of this political roadblock just recently, didn't we?
We did. The analysis pointed to the cancellation of Holtec International's plan for a consolidated interim storage facility down in New Mexico.
Interim storage, so not even permanent disposal, just temporary?
Exactly. And Holtec had gone through the federal hoops. They actually secured a license from the NRC, but the project got killed anyway due to intense political opposition at the state level.
So state politics trumped federal approval and technical readiness.
Completely. It's a powerful reminder that social license, public acceptance, and political consensus are absolutely crucial. You can have the best tech and federal backing, but if the local or state community says no, it's incredibly difficult to move forward.
And it raises a huge question, doesn't it? If the industry can't even get an interim storage site approved, how is it realistically going to manage the waste from potentially hundreds of SMRs being deployed across the country, especially if they produce even more waste volume?
That is the critical political challenge that will likely shape the pace and scale of SMR deployment beyond these initial anchor projects. It's the long-term Achilles heel.
Okay, so that's a major constraint for the high-density side. But how does this compare to the constraints facing the low-density options, like massive solar and wind farms? The analysis contrasted them, particularly on land use.
Right, and this is where the high-density approach has a built-in advantage that addresses a different but equally potent political friction point: land. The comparison data from the research team was pretty stark.
Yeah, I remember seeing that. A standard 1,000 megawatt nuclear plant needs vastly less land than renewables for the same output.
Dramatically less. Compared to utility-scale wind, the research suggested 173 times less land for nuclear. Compared to utility-scale solar, it was 31 times less land.
173 times, 31 times. Those are enormous differences in physical footprint.
Huge. And that difference is precisely why these massive low-density renewable megaprojects often run into major headwinds. The analysis highlighted the recent cancellation of the giant Esmeralda 7 solar and storage project out in Nevada.
What happened there?
Well, it just illustrates the problem. This project was slated to cover something like 185 square miles. That's an area nearly the size of Las Vegas.
Wow.
And that sheer scale, the immense land use intensity, makes these projects incredibly vulnerable. They face lengthy environmental reviews, potential conflicts with conservation efforts, local opposition, procedural delays. The vast land requirement itself becomes a major source of friction at almost every stage.
So SMRs face the waste politics, big renewables face the land use politics.
Kind of, yeah. Now, it's crucial to state, as the research notes, wind and solar are vital. They've grown incredibly fast and are absolutely essential parts of the energy mix.
Of course.
But their variability and land intensity create knock-on effects. Their intermittency necessitates massive investments elsewhere in the system.
Oh.
The analysis pointed out that just one grid region, PJM in the eastern U.S.,
Serving tens of millions of people.
right, serving 65 million customers. PJM estimates it needs to add a staggering 16 gigawatts of battery storage by 2032.
16 gigawatts of batteries just to manage the existing and planned renewables and prevent load shedding.
Essentially, yes, just to keep the grid stable and reliable as more variable sources come online. That's an enormous amount of storage investment required solely because of the nature of low-density intermittent generation.
So it really frames the core trade-off, doesn't it? High-density sources have this intense political and scientific challenge around waste and long-term disposal. Low-density sources have the physical constraints of needing vast amounts of land and creating intermittency, which then requires colossal investment in transmission and storage to compensate.
That's the dilemma. And the strategic shift we seem to be witnessing, driven by AI and security, appears to be prioritizing the technologies that solve the land use and intermittency problems first, even while grappling with the waste issue.
Density seems to be winning the strategic argument, at least for now.
For critical baseload and reliability needs, it certainly looks that way. #outro. So pulling all this together, what does this accelerated strategic push towards density actually mean for tomorrow? How does the future grid look in the tomorrow unveiled view?
Well, based on everything we've discussed, it's definitely not an either situation, is it? Not just nuclear, renewables, or storage.
No, not at all. The vision emerging from the research points toward a highly sophisticated hybrid grid, but one built foundationally on high energy density concepts at multiple scales.
Okay, a hybrid grid based on density. What are the components?
You've got the centralized, ultra-reliable sources, the SMRs coming online soon, and eventually maybe commercial fusion reactors. These form that unbreakable hot core baseload. They power the really critical stuff. The AI data centers, heavy industry, military bases, things that absolutely cannot go down.
The always-on backbone.
Exactly. And then complementing that core, you have the distributed intelligent assets. The virtual power plants aggregating home batteries, maybe those advanced long-duration flow batteries deployed at substations or commercial sites.
Providing the flexibility, the rapid response, the resilience right out at the grid edge.
Precisely. Hyper-localized flexibility and resilience, smoothing out demand and supply second by second. But again, enabled by increasingly dense storage technologies.
And the timelines we're seeing are just compressed compared to historical energy transitions.
They really are. We're talking potentially operational military microreactors by 2028. Commercial fusion companies targeting power delivery also by 2028 or the early 2030s. Major SMR deployments ramping up through the 2030s. This isn't some far future scenario anymore.
It feels like we're entering an era defined by this global strategic race for energy abundance, driven by these undeniable needs of the digital age and security concerns.
I think that's right. Energy abundance, but specifically reliable, dense energy abundance.
So the main challenge now isn't necessarily inventing the core technologies anymore. It's about execution.
It's shifting heavily towards execution, yes. Solving the remaining hurdles, scaling up the material science for things like fusion magnets or advanced batteries, building out those secure HALEU fuel supply chains we talked about, managing the manufacturing scale-up for SMRs.
And, crucially, figuring out that nuclear waste issue and achieving the social license needed for deployment and disposal.
That remains the big one on the nuclear side, yes. Those execution challenges, supply chains, manufacturing, waste, public acceptance, those are the factors that will really determine the winners and losers in this next energy era.
Okay, before we wrap up, if you're listening on a podcast service like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, we'd be incredibly grateful if you could leave us a rating and review for Tomorrow Unveiled. It genuinely helps us reach new listeners who might be interested in these deep dives.
And we really do love hearing your thoughts. Whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite podcast app, please leave a comment and let us know what you think about this whole high-density, hot-core strategy we've discussed today.
All right, and as always, we like to leave you with a final, provocative thought to mull over. We've talked a lot about how the military is prioritizing nuclear power SMRs, microreactors, to guarantee energy security for its bases and critical operations.
Makes sense from their perspective.
Absolutely. So the question for you, our listener, is this. Thinking beyond military bases and AI data centers, what is the single most important piece of civilian infrastructure that you think deserves this kind of guaranteed, high-density, ultra-reliable power first?
Where would that kind of energy security provide the biggest societal benefit or leverage?
Should it be, for example, massive clean hydrogen production hubs trying to decarbonize industry? Or maybe huge desalination plants to combat growing water scarcity? Or perhaps critical advanced manufacturing facilities that we need to onshore?
Lots of possibilities. Where does guaranteed power matter most outside of defense and computing?
Something to think about. Thank you for joining us for this week's deep dive into the future of energy on Tomorrow Unveiled. We'll see you next time.